Take a deep breath, because it's time to find out how low you can go when you're swimming with the daring divers of the natural world. We're counting down the top 10 most extreme divers in the animal kingdom to find out who can hold their breath the longest. Join us on a voyage to the bottom of the sea when diving is taken to the most extreme. Earth is a planet of extremes. Extreme places and extreme animals. But some animals are more extreme than others. Join us as we count down to find the most unusual, the most extraordinary, the most extreme. "70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water. Yet we know more about the moon than we do about the deep ocean. If we were like fish and had gills, it would be easy for us to explore underwater. But like the contenders coming up in the countdown, when we dive, we have to hold our breath. Often, our first underwater experience is using a snorkel. But have you ever wondered why we don't go diving using a 3-meter long snorkel? Well, even half a meter down, the water pressure is so strong that we can't expand our lungs enough to inhale air from the surface. But our first contender has no such trouble. It's the elephant. It can breathe through its 3-meter trunk, even though its body is much deeper underwater than any snorkeling human. That's because connective tissue in the elephant's chest cushions its lungs against the surrounding water pressure. Elephants are surprisingly good swimmers. When a boat carrying a circus sank 50 kilometers off the eastern seaboard of the United States, the only animals to make it ashore were the elephants. Swimming is a useful adaptation for elephants who need to cross rivers or lakes in search of food. It also comes in handy when one man travels to work. Meet John Edelstein from Los Angeles. In rush hour, if the traffic's backed up on the bridge, he can take a different route home. John drives an amphibious car. The vehicle is one of less than 4,000 amphicars produced in Germany in the 1960s, and it's still turning heads today.
People look at you and some are in shock and disbelief. They're like, "What are you doing? You're crazy!" Other people are like, "Wow, look at that, that's amazing!" And some people are like, "Can I call the 911? You know, do you need help? I'll call the emergency." When you're driving around, it's a smile maker. Everybody smiles at the amphicars. It's kind of a funny looking little car. This is a 1964 Amphicar. It's got all the standard equipment of a car, front headlights, turn signals. You wonder where the water line comes? Comes right about here. So you wonder how the door seals. This is a rubber seal, and here's a rubber seal. Now this handle right here pulls it tight. That's how it keeps the water out. And now the best part, the propellers. Twin screws, they're made of nylon. They're made to break in case you hit a rock or something rather than the transmission. The front wheels act as steering, so those are my rudders. So it handles like a car in the water, but kind of handles like a boat on land. Hey, you know which way it is to Highway 15?
Oh, that way.
That way, thank you.
That thing's cool.
Just like the amphicar, elephants travel along the surface of the water. They're number 10 in the countdown because they only hold their breath for a few seconds before lifting their snorkels into the air. Our next contenders dive much deeper and have to hold their breath much longer. Diving can be difficult for birds, including these torrent ducks. Their oily feathers repel moisture, which is why we say, like water off a duck's back. Their feathers lock together, keeping water out, warmth in, and helping them float, no matter how much the river rages. But our next contender is a most unusual bird. The Galapagos cormorant can't fly, but it can dive, as it hunts for fish and eels. It's number 9 in the countdown because it can hold its breath for up to 4.5 minutes. Compare that to the average human, who can only last for about a minute underwater. Unlike a duck, the cormorant's feathers are not tightly locked together, so water can seep through. Being a little waterlogged makes it easier to dive below the surface. But wet feathers lose heat quickly. That's why it has to spend time drying out in the sun before it can return to the sea. Those tiny wings are useless for flying. But who needs to fly when underwater you're propelled by 2 powerful webbed feet? The Galapagos cormorant relies on its eyes when hunting for fish. It can see much better underwater than any human. That's because the cormorant has special muscles in its eye to change the curve of the lens so that it can focus both above and below water. Since we can't change the shape of the lens in our eye, things look very different underwater. When we go diving, everything looks blurry and out of focus. That's because light travels through water at about 3/4 of its usual speed, and our eyes can't adjust to the change. That's why we wear a mask. It provides a pocket of air so our eyes can focus. But as we dive deeper, the pressure squeezes the mask onto our face, which is why you don't go diving in swimming goggles. If you can't breathe out into the mask, you can't equalize the pressure around your eyes, and eventually your eyeballs would get sucked out. No wonder some people think that diving is for the birds, especially on China's Yangtze River. Why get wet when you can train cormorants to do the work for you? For generations, these men have worked with their hand-raised cormorants to catch fish for their village. The birds bring the fish to the surface inside their long necks. Although they're giving up their big catch, there are plenty of smaller rewards on hand for the hard-working cormorants. The skills of these underwater hunters have been recognized for a long time. Cormorants were first recorded working with humans in China 1,500 years ago. The cormorant's sight, speed, and agility make them more than a match for most fish. They're only limited by the length of time they can stay underwater. While the cormorant can hold its breath for more than 4 minutes, coming up in the countdown, we'll meet another Galapagos diver that can stay down 15 times longer. Our first 2 contenders made diving look easy. But as our countdown continues, we'll meet some underwater dancers that take men's breath away. And what furry mammal has to wrap itself in kelp so it doesn't float away in its sleep? As any diver knows, water conducts heat away from our bodies 25% faster than air. That's why divers wear suits of neoprene rubber. The rubber contains millions of tiny gas bubbles, and it's this layer of trapped air that provides insulation. The next contender in our countdown of extreme divers also traps air around its body, although instead of rubber, it wears fur. The sea otter is number 8 in the countdown because it can spend up to 6 minutes under the cold waters of the North Pacific Ocean. Unlike other animals we'll meet later in the countdown, the otter has little fatty blubber to keep it warm. Instead, its furry coat acts as a dry suit. The otter blows air into its fur, where it stays trapped as an insulating blanket during a dive. The otter spends half its day grooming, because if its fur gets dirty or matted, it would quickly lose its insulating properties. With a coat of up to 150,000 hairs per square centimeter, the sea otter has the thickest fur of any mammal. It needs all the insulation it can get because a sea otter spends hours underwater collecting shellfish from the seafloor. It can stay down for long periods because the otter's lungs are twice as large as other similar-sized mammals. Large lungs also help to keep it buoyant on the surface. This is important considering it eats, sleeps, and even gives birth while bobbing on the sea. Spending time on the surface is something that 61-year-old Reginald Huffstedler has also mastered. He can continuously tread water for more than 100 hours. He claims that he enters a trance-like state, reducing his heart rate while still keeping his legs moving to stay afloat. Medical researchers are studying Reginald to try and find out just how he can continuously tread water for more than 4 days. The sea otter also has no problem staying afloat, thanks to its thick coat and massive lungs. In fact, this extreme diver has to wrap itself in kelp to stop floating away in its sleep. So far, we've seen divers dressed in fur and in feathers. But coming up, we'll visit a strange hotel where you can wear a wetsuit on your dinner date. And we'll discover why some people think that sitting in ice water is good for their health. Our countdown of the most extreme divers continues with legendary creatures, half human, half fish. Today, mermaids are usually only seen in B-movies, but there was a time when sailors thought they saw them in the wild. Not long after discovering the New World, Christopher Columbus recorded seeing 3 mermaids rise out of the water. He said they were not as beautiful as expected, looking more like men in the face. Well, Columbus must have known some strange-looking men, because chances are he saw something like this. Sailors must have been really lonely to think that dugongs, or manatees, were beautiful women from the sea. They get their looks not from mermaids, but their closest ancestor, the elephant. But just like mermaids, dugongs are great divers. They're number 7 in the countdown, because dugongs can stay submerged for up to 8 minutes on a single breath of air. Along with its close cousin the manatee, dugongs are the only fully aquatic mammalian herbivores. In beds of seagrass, they're the lawnmowers of the ocean. It may be an ugly mermaid, but its face is built for diving. It has whiskers for feeling in the mud, and its large nostrils can be sealed shut to keep out water. The dugong's long body and powerful tail are the stuff that legends are made of. No wonder real-life mermaids have difficulty learning how to use their tail. These mermaids live at Weeki Wachee Springs in Florida. Since opening in 1947, over 1,000 mermaids have graced this unique underwater stage. With 2 30-minute shows a day, these mermaids are experts at holding their breath, sometimes for over 4 minutes. By exhaling slowly, they can control their depth within the underwater theater. And when they run out of breath, they just have to puff on an air tube. Christopher Columbus and his men were probably hoping to meet mermaids like this on their long voyage of discovery. So, meeting big, blubbery relatives of the elephant would have been something of a disappointment. However, people today treasure an encounter with dugongs, even if sometimes they get a little too close for comfort. For centuries, people have been looking for ways to explore beneath the waves, and one of the earliest inventions was the diving bell. Initially, this meant little more than wandering around in a pocket of air trapped in a barrel. Back in 325 BC, it's said that Alexander the Great was lowered beneath the sea in a huge diving bell that even had glass windows. However, this technology's nothing new for our next contender. For millions of years, it's been making a diving bell woven out of silk. Swimming in to number 6 in the countdown is the aptly named diving bell spider. It spends its life underwater, yet, like all its terrestrial cousins, it still has to breathe air. That's why it spins a fine woven net to trap a bubble that becomes the spider's oxygen supply and its home. To replenish the air, the spider takes a trip topside and collects another bubble by trapping it in the fine hairs on its posterior. The diving bell spider is number 6 in the countdown because it can spend its entire life underwater, where it becomes the terror of tadpoles, small fish, and invertebrates. The diving bell spider feeds by pouring digestive juices on its prey. If it did this in the water, the juices would become so diluted they'd be useless. But in the diving bell, the spider is surrounded by air, so it can feed just like it would on land. And now we can live like the diving bell spider, thanks to a house that was designed to be sunk. The Jules Undersea Lodge in Key Largo, Florida is 9 meters below the surface. So, guests must dive down to the wet room entrance. The lodge is filled with compressed air, which prevents the water from flooding the bedrooms and living area. Guests remain in contact with the surface thanks to an umbilical cable which delivers fresh air, water, power, and communications. This means that, unlike the diving bell spider, guests don't have to regularly return to the surface to trap air on the hairs of their bottom. So far, we've seen a bubble-bottom spider and a mermaid mimic. But still to come is a baby that goes for a swim and gets the shock of its life. And it's down periscope as we go diving in a submarine that's filled not with air, but water. If you take a trip down the Zambezi River, it's a good idea not to bump into the next contender in our countdown of the most extreme divers. It's one of the most dangerous mammals in Africa. Charging in to number 5 in the countdown is the hippopotamus. It may not look like an extreme diver, but in the searing heat of Africa, the hippo's sensitive skin is in danger of dehydration and sunburn, so it heads underwater for protection. The hippo can stay submerged for 20 minutes on a single breath. It's so at home underwater, it sleeps, eats, and even suckles young between breaths. The hippo sinks to the bottom because its body is heavier than water. And without fins, it doesn't swim, but gallops. No wonder the name hippopotamus is derived from the Greek words for river horse. At the University of California in San Diego, these engineering students are trying to make humans move as fast as hippos underwater. They're working on a pedal-powered submarine, as pilot John McKeag explains.
One of the key systems to the submarine is really getting the human power into the water. We call it a drivetrain, but it's really just our pedals and our propeller. If you can't get your power into the water, your submarine's not going to go anywhere, so you might as well just be swimming.
And swimming is just too slow when you're preparing for the International Human-Powered Submarine Race. The capsule is small and streamlined to reduce drag, and steered by levers that move the fins left and right or up and down. Even a simple adjustment to the propeller angle can significantly increase the sub's speed. This is called a wet submarine because the shell completely fills with water, so the pilot must breathe from an internal scuba tank. It may not look as though the sub's moving very fast, but some of these vessels can hit 15 kilometers an hour. That's at least twice as fast as an Olympic swimmer. All it requires is a very fit pilot. To maintain top speed, John has to keep his legs pumping, just like a hippo. Its sturdy legs work underwater and on land as it grazes along the riverbank at night. Things are very different for our next contender, which has to dive to find food, even if it means entering the coldest seas on the planet. If you're looking for a little pick-me-up, why not take a swim in the middle of winter? In Russia, ice bathing is a traditional fitness activity. And perhaps there is some method to their madness. Sometimes it can be warmer in the water than out of it. Especially when you live in Antarctica, the coldest place on the planet. With air temperatures dropping to around 45 below zero, seawater hovers around a comparatively balmy 0 degrees Celsius. This is home to the emperor penguin. No other bird dives deeper or for longer. Emperor penguins can descend over 500 meters and spend 22 minutes underwater on a single breath. While most penguins feed in the shallows, emperors dive deep to catch fish and squid. Emperor penguins have more oxygen in their respiratory system than most diving animals, because in addition to their lungs, these birds have several large air sacs to store air. And keeping warm is no problem. With about 15 feathers per square centimeter, The emperor penguin has the highest feather density of any bird. The outer feathers are waterproof, trapping a layer of air close to the penguin's skin. Heat from the penguin's body keeps this insulating layer at a cozy 32 degrees Celsius. That's more than 30 degrees warmer than its underwater hunting ground. Thanks to all that insulation, swimming in the freezing ocean's no problem for a penguin. But there's one Russian who could survive here without any protection at all. This is Karim Diab. He became the first person to sit motionless in icy water for an hour. That's an incredibly long time to stand in a hole cut in a frozen river in Moscow, even if he trained for 2 years for the event. Most people would get extreme hypothermia after being submerged for only a few minutes. That's why he's being monitored by scientists. They're trying to find out how he can survive for so long in the hope of developing new ways of saving lives. The emperor penguin has no trouble staying alive in the coldest water imaginable. But it's not the only extreme diver living in Antarctica. Later in the countdown, we'll meet an animal that can hold its breath for an amazing 80 minutes. You'd think that nothing could compete with our last 2 contenders. But one man's keen to try in a contraption built in his own backyard. And what extraordinary diver emerged from the unknown depths to confound science? Our countdown of the most extreme divers continues with a group of animals that's perfectly at home underwater. Many reptiles can dive, but there's only one lizard that spends time under the sea, and it lives on the islands of the Galapagos. Swimming in to number 3 in the countdown is the marine iguana. It can hold its breath for up to an hour as it feeds on algae growing on the rocks. The marine iguana is dependent on the sea for its food, but these waters have hidden dangers. The islands of the Galapagos are bathed by cool currents flowing up from Antarctica. Cold water can be a killer for an iguana. Being cold-blooded, the lizard can't create warmth within its body. So to reduce heat loss, it slows its heart rate and restricts blood flow to the surface of the skin. But after an hour underwater, an iguana's body temperature can still drop by nearly 30 degrees. That's why the lizard heads topside to warm up and to clear the sinuses. Iguanas swallow a lot of seawater when they're feeding, so they've come up with an unusual way of excreting excess salt. They sneeze. So if you see a white iguana, it's probably just covered in dried salt snot. But if you're a record-breaking scuba diver, there are far worse side effects from being underwater. Just ask Jerry Hall after he set a new record for the world's longest scuba dive. For more than 5 days, the only way he could communicate was by writing messages on a diving slate. And when it came to mealtime, Jerry was delivered a liquid lunch. After 120 hours, he finally emerged. Tired, hungry, and with skin so wrinkly it ached. But he gained a new record and raised funds for his favorite charity. You wouldn't find a marine iguana underwater for 5 days. Even an hour in the chilly sea is enough to send this cold-blooded diver back to the surface. If only it had a bit more blubber. A thick layer of fat would mean it could happily dive in some of the coldest waters in the world, just like our next contender. After 9 months in a watery womb, perhaps it's no surprise that human babies are good divers. In this class of water babies in England, parents learn that their infants instinctively hold their breath when they enter the water. So it's bizarre that our next contender is a marine mammal that has to be taught how to dive. But then, what baby would want to go swimming when you live in Antarctica? This is home to the Weddell seal. Her baby is about to get the shock of its life. The difference between being in the womb and on the ice is an extraordinary 60 degrees. No wonder the young pup spends its first week doing nothing but eat. It has to pile on as much insulating blubber as possible to survive both on and under the ice. Eventually, its body will be 50% blubber, making it the world's fattest baby. But swimming doesn't come naturally. Mom has to teach her baby that it pays to hold your breath when you enter the water. Luckily, the pup is a fast learner. Soon, it will be able to join its parents, who can dive for 80 minutes to an astounding 700 meters in search of fish and other small vertebrates. That's 4 times further than the most extreme human freedivers. That's because we can only hold our breath for a few minutes before our oxygen reserves are quickly exhausted. A Weddell seal stores oxygen not just in the lungs, but in body tissues and the blood. And relative to body size, the Weddell seal has twice as much blood as a human, which means double the amount of oxygenated blood available to use on a deep dive. But some people have found a different way to increase the amount of blood in their body. For 2,000 years, Japanese ama divers have regularly been spending up to 4 hours a day collecting seafood from the ocean floor. Their most profitable harvest is the pearl tucked inside the shell of the oyster. Only women dive, and recently, scientists have discovered that they've become better adapted for their life underwater. When we hold our breath, our muscles have to burn stored reserves of oxygen, and one reservoir for oxygenated blood is the spleen. Scientists have discovered that unlike most humans, AMA divers can get 10% more oxygenated blood out into their body because the volume of their spleen decreases by up to 20% during a dive. But AMA women are not the only divers that can stay underwater longer by squeezing their spleen. The Weddell seal uses the same technique to inject 60% more oxygenated blood around its body. But not even the seal's incredible physiology can compete with the most extreme diver in the countdown. We've seen the 9 contenders. They're the best of the best. Only one animal is a more extreme diving machine. It's hard to believe that 50 million years ago, the ancestors of the most extreme diver in the countdown ran around on 4 legs. Today, whales are supremely adapted for life under the waves. Their legs have become fins, and they no longer breathe through their mouth, but rather a nostril or blowhole on top of their head. And their physiology has changed so that they can hold their breath for a very long time. And the champion diver of them all is the sperm whale. It can spend up to 2 hours underwater. So, by the time it reaches the surface, it needs to reoxygenate its body as quickly as possible. With each spout, the whale exchanges 85% of the air in its lungs. That's 5 times more efficient than human lungs. It can take up to 70 breaths before the whale is ready to dive again. It can descend 3 kilometers into the dark ocean. That's the equivalent of diving down the combined height of 8 Empire State Buildings. The weight of all that water above causes extreme pressure. Even most submarines can't dive as deep as the sperm whale.
We're down 2,500 feet. If we go any deeper, the submarine will crash like the shell of an egg.
But not all submarines dive so deep or cost millions of dollars. Just ask Canadian Pierre Poulin. He built a submarine in his own backyard. He called it Big, which is ironic given that it's one of the smallest submersibles in the world. By day, Pierre is a mechanic in a snowmobile factory. But now, he's attempting to set a new world record for the longest dive in a submarine of this size. At a nearby lake, crowds gather to watch the submarine launch. Even though it's a one-man submarine, it takes a whole team of people to get this vessel underwater. Pierre needs a support crew close by if he has to exit the sub in an emergency. Just like a whale, the length of Pierre's dive is determined by the amount of oxygen on board. He's breathing compressed air from the tanks mounted on the submarine. It's driven by two 12-volt propellers, which can be a bit of a problem if they get caught in pondweed. Pierre and his team became the first to dive for more than 30 minutes in a submarine of such small proportions.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Creating a submarine in your own backyard is a significant achievement. But it'll take a lot more work before Pierre's construction can compete with a whale. No other air-breathing animals can dive as deep or for as long as these living submarines. Whales spend so much time submerged that very little is known about their life in the depths of the ocean. However, one thing is for sure. When it comes to holding your breath underwater, whales really are the most extreme.